right.
They say I should walk away, that some things don't deserve a say. But how do we ever make our way if nobody's willing to stay? I don't hold the answers, I don't make the rules, I just leave room for the ones who choose to think a little deeper, talk a little more. That's what this fight's been for. Oh, say I'm giving them space to speak, but I'm just trying to find what's underneath. Not here to fight, not here to preach, just holding a light where we rarely reach. You say I'm giving them space to speak, but I'm just trying to find what's underneath. Not here to fight, not here to preach, just holding a light where we rarely reach.
And hey, the intro is done on YouTube. I'm here with Secular Rarity. We're doing a show here on politics, because why not? And we were just talking about how Secular Rarity, he likes street epistemology. I'm a street epistemology guy. I was just telling him about how I like to kind of push the boundaries at least a little bit, break some of the rules, do things a little bit differently. But hey, you say some stuff now.
Yeah, yeah. I'll just say, yeah, I also like street epistemology. I actually just recently, on my own, went through the Navigating Beliefs course, which is a super cool course, totally free. You can just go hop on and just, do it yourself. I love having conversations where we disagree and where we do so in a manner that is interested in getting at the truth. I don't like to disagree just for the sake of disagreement. I don't like to just yell at people or anything. It happens. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm perfect. Of course not. But,
Me either.
right. I mean, who is? But, one of the things that I've been engaged in for quite a while now is over a year and a half now, myself and a couple of other people in the Middle Tennessee area have been regularly putting on in-person discussions between believers and non-believers. And so we get together once a month and we do generally about an hour of back and forth, and then like 30 minutes of question and answers from the audience. And the last one that we had, which was just a few days ago, just this Thursday that passed, excuse me, we had about 60 people all standing in a room. That we were packed shoulder to shoulder. And by the time that we ended the event, one of the last things that we did, we said, hey, would everybody here that is a follower of Christ, a Christian, a believer, whatever, would you just raise your hand real quick? And then we said, hey, everybody that's a deconverted or atheist, skeptic, would you raise your hand real quick? Like, these are the people, to go find and go talk to at the end of it. And by the time they were kicking us out of the place 2 hours later, people were still actively engaged in conversation with each other. And
Sweet.
like, that's what I love, that is so awesome. So yeah, I love having these types of conversations when I can.
Sweet. Yeah, me too. That's awesome that happened. So without further ado, we do have some hands already up in the audience.
Yeah.
So let's bring them on up. I think this fella was first, so bring this person on up.
Hey,
Hey, how's it going?
It's doing pretty well. I just got to visit my buddy.
I'm sorry, say again?
Yeah, I just finished a visit with one of my close friends.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was 2 hours out from me, so now I got to drive back to my wife.
Ah, all right. Cool. Good stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we go ahead.
Oh, I was asking you how are you doing? Because you asked me.
Oh, I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, not too
Everything's
bad.
all good.
Did you have a claim or a belief that you wanted to explore?
Well, I mean, so it's sort of to inspect your worldview, as
Okay.
you are both secularists, atheists. in a sense. I don't know if you claim atheism, but secularism definitely. And I just want to understand, because you both search for truth, you look for meaningful discussion, you don't just beat your opponent into submission. What's the from a secular perspective, what gives you the ethical demands to really go, well, we must have these types of conversations where it's not really just might makes right. Scientific endeavors aren't really just I beat you over the head with a plank, and then therefore my conclusion is there. We pierce through the evidence. We parse through the evidence. We look at the contradictions in our worldviews. We look at the meaningfulness of the data itself. What's the foundation from a secular worldview to even be doing something as absurd as uh, um, looking through the evidence rather than just asserting our views, beating our opponents over the head with like a plank?
I think
Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Pierce. Sorry.
I think ultimately what you're asking, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. If this isn't what you're asking, just be like, Pierce, no, you're a dummy. But I think what you're asking is like, what's the point? What's the purpose of having these conversations? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Cool. So for
Yeah.
me, it's because I see a lot of disagreement in the world. You turn on the news and you see talking heads just firing back at each other constantly, right? You see protests that turn into riots. You see a lot of bad stuff happening in this world. And I think if we were able to not have those back and forth, just angry conversations, if we could actually sit down and actually talk this shit through, and able to explore, like, hey, where are you at? Is this reliable? Where does this come from? Understand each other. And hey, maybe we can figure some stuff out.
Yeah, and I'd say largely, I mean, I agree with that, in general. To like directly try and answer the question, I don't know that there is anything from a secular perspective that does that, because I don't think that's really what secularism is talking about.
The secular perspective for like the ethical demand of parsing through the evidence, that it isn't just might makes right. You can't just assert your views. You must be consistent. You can't contradict the evidence presented.
I don't think again, I don't think there's anything, because I don't think that's what secularism is talking about. It would kind of be like asking, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding the question, but it would be kind of like asking, like, what in your worldview about the NFL makes you think that we should go for truth? And I'd be like, well, nothing, because that's not what the NFL is about.
Well, so if you play the NFL,
does that make sense though? But does that make sense to you? My response.
So each worldview has a certain metaphysic that it's affirming.
Secularism.
And secularism. So
what
like
metaphysics is secularism affirming?
Well, from a perspective that you don't, there is no God. And maybe not even making a claim that there is no God, but we're gonna try to get somewhere apart from God. That would be the secular perspective. We're gonna try to do things apart from God.
I don't think I don't think that would be an accurate representation. It wouldn't be the definition that I would take. But I mean, you can argue that, but I wouldn't. Yeah.
Well, isn't secularism definitionally the absence of God?
No. And that's okay. I understand if you're confused on that, but a lot of people are. Secularism is about an equal playing field for either all or none. Does that make sense? Then does that make sense as to why it doesn't really now? But real quick though, just to try to move into the space, right? I would say like secular humanism maybe has some things that are in this category that we could explore. Because then I would say like, oh yeah, inherent in that understanding is, which I would probably even call secular humanism a religion in a legal sense, not in a sociological sense.
Yeah.
But secular humanism would answer those questions, I think, that you're trying to get at. We could go into that if you want, but that's different than just secularism.
Well, baked into what secularism is definitionally, isn't in practice, you're trying to get somewhere absent of some sort of deity or God
See, I wouldn't
or
say that.
religious
I don't know.
commitments.
Maybe Pierce would have a different definition. What do you think? But I mean, we can go look up what various dictionaries say, but that wouldn't be what I would say. But what do you think on that,
I mean,
Pierce?
Is the word we're discussing secularism? Is that it?
Mhm.
Just want to
yeah,
make sure.
yeah.
I would call it. I would say it's non-belief that, or like I wouldn't say would be a disbelief in a higher power or a god. I would say it would be a lack of, at least a lack of belief, and then everything under that will
Yeah.
vary person to person. But it encompasses
Yeah.
not being confident that a higher power exists. That's all I would say.
Yeah, but so I'm talking about like secularism. Just a quick definition. The principle of separation of state from religious institutions.
Yeah,
And
that's what I
I was
just
bringing
looked
up in practice, what that means is you're trying to get somewhere. There's a goal you're trying to attain from the institutions, and it's going to be outside of religious pre-commitments.
So again, I just think this is a misunderstanding of what this is trying to get at. So for instance, it is completely within the secular bounds for a governmental institution to put on a Christian themed play. Do you want me to explain?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
As
Sure.
long as they give the equal opportunity to the Jewish play and the Hindu play and the Satanist play and the
Yeah.
secular play. So it's
Okay.
not, it's what it's trying to do is it's trying to say the institution itself and how it operates should not be one that gives any preference or discrimination to
Well, that's
anybody
just
based on that
multiculturalism.
particular. Say again?
That's just multiculturalism, though. Or
No, it isn't. No, it
there's
isn't.
another word
Multiculturalism is
for it.
about is a broader understanding. It has to do with things like language and dance and food. This is specifically about religion and the institutions of government.
Well,
It's just like freedom of speech.
cultures
Like freedom of
cultures
speech doesn't
have
have anything
religions
to
baked
do
into
with
them.
two people sitting in their basement and just talking. That doesn't have anything to do with freedom of speech, right? Freedom of speech is a specific thing related to the institution of government and how it behaves with the civilians that make it up. Same thing with secularism.
Yeah. Okay, so
Okay.
just rejecting the words. I'll just
Glad
get
we
off
got
the
to an
word
agreement
secular.
there. I love being
perspective
able
of-
to start off on an agreement, man. That's great.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I mean,
Go ahead.
I'm just asking. I'm just asking from a perspective that, let's just say you don't believe in God or there is no God. From either one of those two perspectives, um, what is the foundation for the ethical demand to really look for consistency, lack of contradictions? You must do rigorous testing on data, because I could say from the Christian worldview, for me, in God's case law, he shows you must look at the evidence of things. It must be you must have a rigorous commitment to evidences. You can't just come to conclusions without them. As far as contradictions go, we're to reject them because it's against his nature. And to be in contradiction is for you to actively participate in lying, is to lie against the truth of things. So that's what I'm saying. From my pre-commitments, I could say, well, I reject inconsistencies. I reject contradictions, and I affirm, the scientific method. I affirm scientific practices using the principle of induction. I affirm these things
And
from
what
my
are you?
pre-commitments. But I'm asking from an atheist or just a non-religious perspective, how do you get that ethical demand?
Yeah, I'm not just off the rip. I'm not sure that I have it. But let me make sure that I'm following. It sounds like what you're saying is that in the Christian worldview, in your worldview, you have something that forces people to behave a certain way or to adhere to a certain principle. I'm not
There's
sure.
an ethical demand. There's an ethical demand of
And it
consistency,
works.
looking for evidence.
How
I'm
effective
sorry,
is
what?
that ethical demand?
Well, I think it's pretty. I think it's pretty effective. So, like, even with you, like, I'm sure. I'm not saying that you reject evidences. I'm not saying you reject that you affirm contradictions because you
Sure.
would be an image bearer of God. But I have a standard before me that says I ought not accept contradictions.
Right, but
That's what I'm saying. There's an
right,
ethical standard before
but
me.
how does it right, but right. I understand that you're saying that you have that. But what I'm asking is, it sounds to me like the reason that this is important for you is because of the effect, right? Like there's no point in having this ethical demand if it doesn't do anything in the real world, right?
Well, I mean, we can talk about like the scientific revolution and how Christians essentially
I
changed
don't
the
think
world
that
during
I
that
don't think that's
period.
what I no, I'd
But
like to stay on topic. I
yeah,
wanna
yeah,
talk about
but
what you brought up because I think it's very interesting. Because
yeah, I
I'll
mean,
be honest,
I think if you,
I'm not positive that I have that thing that you're asking for, but again, it sounds to me like the reason that you're asking for this is because of the effectiveness of this
yeah,
in forcing
yeah,
people to
well,
behave and act in the world. Is that correct?
yeah, to an extent, to an extent. I mean, there's a little bit of pragmatism involved.
So what if the demonstration in the real world is that it doesn't work? Is that a
The
problem?
demonstration in the real world is that it doesn't work. Well, we actually see the opposite. The demonstration in the real world is you have um, people in dress, people with beards sporting a dress and bra like
I don't
that.
know what I
That's
don't
the
know what this has
rejection.
to do
That's the
with
rejection
anything.
of the Christian. I'm saying
If we could
that's the
stay on
rejection
topic.
of the Christian worldview.
Hang on just a second. We're having a pretty good conversation, I think, but I don't know why we're not able to focus here. So let's try real quick. It sounds
I'm
to
showing
me
you
like what you're asking
what
is, it
unveils.
sounds to me like what you're asking is about the ability to essentially persuade or force others to my worldview. And I'm saying, I don't know that I have that. I might, there might
Hmm.
be some answers out there that we could go
No,
through,
that's
but
not what I'm saying.
Yeah,
oh, okay. So then I'm confused.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, no,
please
no.
help me out.
It's nothing
Yeah,
to
help
do.
me
It's
out.
nothing to do with. Yeah, it has nothing to do with coercion.
It has
It,
nothing to do with
I
getting
mean,
people to act a
no, no,
certain
no,
way in
no.
agreement with your worldview. I can repeat that if you need me to.
Oh, okay? So you're saying when I'm talking about ethics, yeah, it has nothing to do with coercion, though.
I
It's a
didn't say
moral
that.
ethical. So it's a moral ethical demand. Like,
Right,
so
but
I'm saying, like,
why is that
there's a
important?
standard.
I don't understand why
Well,
a moral ethical
well,
demand is important unless it's about the effect in the world around us. And if it's not
well,
about the effect in the
there
world
is an
around
effect in the
us,
world around us because
so you
there's a
agree that it
standard.
is or you don't agree?
Without a standard, somebody can like I said earlier, what's to stop the person with a scientific theory and he's to be peer reviewed by several other of his equals, except here's the issue, except he has planted things in their offices saying, if you give me a bad peer review, I'm going to blow up your office or blow up your family's home or so. Just think of some
I
wild
haven't been
radical
following for a minute,
scientists.
Pierce, and I'm not positive if you have been.
I
I'd love to help
Yeah,
try to make
yeah,
this a
yeah.
bit better for
It's
everybody in
a,
the audience.
let me try
I'm bringing
to
this up.
Hang on.
It's a
Yeah, hang on. Maybe Pierce can help us out
let
a
me try to
little.
bridge this. Yeah,
it,
I
Yeah.
was on board with you for a while, and then I kind of went overboard. But let me try to bring this back. Let me see if I
Yeah.
understand correctly.
How's that?
So I think
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
saying like, in order the way like you would determine truth, what keeps you in line and seeking truth is like, uh, God commands that you must do that. You're not going to lie. God says, be
Okay.
truthful, seek the truth, do
there's
right,
there's
right?
a standard, there's a plumb line.
And you're asking, what is that equivalent for us? What drives us to seek this truth
Yeah,
and be
a-
honest? And
apart apart from the revelation, yeah, where do you find from an atheistic or agnostic perspective that there is an ethical demand that is real, a real ethical demand for rejecting contradictions, for even looking for the evidence of things and not just applying might makes right. Like I was bringing that up with the doctor's office and the peer reviewed paper. It was a might makes right scenario. What says that what he's doing isn't what he should be doing?
curiosity. for me. That's personally. I mean, I know that might not be like a ethical thing, but it's what I want. It's what I desire. Like I'm curious about the truth. I want the truth. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like I think that if I believed something
Yeah.
or, used a poor method to figure out if something was true and I came to the wrong conclusion, that could hurt me. That could hurt others.
Mhm.
And I would want to figure
Yeah,
out what is
but
true.
isn't it assuming a ton of things? Like first off, that one ought to even care about truth. Two, that you ought not hurt others. Like your premise is they're assuming a lot of things on the back end.
It's
I
not
don't
It's
think
really begging
so.
the question.
I
not so
think
much a
truth can be. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
not so much a premise. It's just a
Yeah.
desire. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily
think-
this logical structured thing. It's just what I want. That's
Yeah,
really
I
all
think
it is.
Pierce
I mean,
was just saying more an emotional state than anything. Which honestly, I think because there was a message in the chat here. Ego I saw was asking, "What's your meta ethical view?" And I think I've gotten more and more into the moral non-realist camp of stuff, and the idea that whenever we're talking about morality, it's all stance dependent. And I don't know how to get away from that. And that's not me saying because I don't know how to get away from that, there is no other answer. That's me like desperately asking others, like, please help me. I'm not sure I know. I listen to a couple of different people and they say some things and it all kind of seems to make sense to me. And if anybody's got a better answer, I mean, I'd love it. But
yeah, I mean,
what I
I
find, well,
was,
hang on just a second, because I find this portion of the conversation much more fascinating, honestly. Because I'm sure you're familiar with Munchausen's trilemma. I don't need to explain it to you. But
no, I don't know.
the
I don't know.
idea. Oh, no, okay. Well, no worries. We talk about it in a minute, I'm sure. But what's fascinating to me about this conversation is, again, it seems to me that what we're all really getting at when we talk about this stuff is the imperative to act in a certain way, right? The again, it's not forceful in the violence or coercive sense. It is forceful in the same sense that 1 + 1 forces you to think of two, right? So
Yeah.
it is by the very nature of it being true, it causes people to act. I think that's what's really interesting, because when we investigate that, I actually don't think anybody has a really good moral system there. And I think that's demonstrable by the fact that anybody making the claim similar to you about this divine, instantiation of absolute existence, so on and so forth, they all seem to disagree with each other and not be able to get the other person to agree, right? So when Ken Ham and what's his face, Ray Comfort, when they start agreeing, then we can say the effectiveness of this system is actually better than any of these other. Does that make sense? I know I kind of rambled for a second. I'll shut up so you can talk, I swear.
So, how should I put it? Yeah, I'm sorry. I had a response in my mind.
No,
It
I
actually
know.
just
No, it's
left me. I
okay.
feel kind of rude now.
No,
I feel
I
kind of rude
rambled.
now.
I rambled. I took up too much space. And honestly, like,
No, you're good. You're good.
I know there's one or two other people that I had seen a hand up in the past. I'm sure, I love talking with people, and I do this stuff pretty regularly.
What was the dilemma?
Munchausen's trilemma.
Yeah.
Munchausen's, like Munchausen syndrome by proxy. It's
Yeah.
fascinating. Infinitism, foundationalism, and coherentism. And I'm not gonna give you too much homework. I do this all the time, I swear. There's somebody out there that's like, SR can never not give somebody fucking work to do. But after you get through all of that, there's an even more fun system. It's not going to be talked about in those, but there's an even more fun one that is pretty new, actually. It's by a philosopher that, I think she published a paper on it in like the late 90s. So it's really, really cool shit. It's like really, really, cutting edge new stuff. But yeah, let's go on to somebody else, and man, just hit me up again in the future. I'm on a bunch of shit. You'll see me. So
I have one thing for you to look into. Look into
please.
Bertrand Russell's And he wrote an exposition of problems in philosophy, and one of them he talks about the uniformity of nature as one of them. And his explanation is, look, like from a non-theistic perspective, because he's giving atheist philosophy
Right.
here.
Right.
He says, justify to me the uniformity of nature.
Mm.
And if you tell me something like, well, it's always been, you appeal to the past, that's simply begging the question. So this is one of the problems from a non-Christian way of thinking, is you don't even get things like the uniformity of nature without assuming it ahead of time. There's no actual grounding for it. Because for you to even search for evidences, it assumes a uniformity of nature that you can look to the past and then predict the future. Well, Bertrand Russell, he says, for you to even say, well, it's always been, we always look to the past. It's always been correct. It seems to work. If you even give that answer, Bertrand Russell says, well, you're only begging the question. There's no grounding for the uniformity of nature from an atheistic perspective. So that's what I was bringing up, and you were asking. Well, you earlier you were asking for help, and I would say, well, you find all these things in Christ. You actually have a grounding for the uniformity of nature by appealing to the revelation that Christ gives. But the minute you leave it, then you have to face these same issues that Bertrand Russell even faced himself.
Yeah, and I would say I haven't read this particular thing from Russell. I've read a few things in the past. He does have some really cool stuff. I think we both agree that just because any one particular person says anything, that doesn't make it true, right? It's the logical argumentation and the evidence and stuff that we follow. But I do think, and I really hope this doesn't sound like I'm talking down or anything, because I'm genuinely not. I do think when you look into the Munchausen trilemma a bit more, I do think you will come back feeling a bit differently about those things, because Russell, even himself, if I remember, he admits he falls into the same trap, because nobody, as far as I know, nobody's got a way around it just yet. But again, after you get through all that, then there is a next step that is even more fun. Which again, I don't want to spoil it, but maybe I should just no. Let's go to somebody else. Let's go to somebody else. And
is it?
Thank you.
Well, yeah. Oh, it was a good talk.
Yeah, all thank you. I really enjoyed it.
We'll chat later. All right. I know there was somebody with their hand up. There, they put it back up.
There was someone. Get on up here.
There we go.
We only sort of yell.
Well,
hey, yell at me all you want. Secularity, Pierce. I know Secularity from the Atheist Experience. You and Armin are like my fucking heroes on that show. And Pierce Watkins, I haven't met you before, but everything I've heard from you tonight has been very succinct. So thank you for being awesome.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Specifically, I'm not a theist, but I am someone who recognizes that there might be some things in religion that we shouldn't necessarily get rid of, like the human inclination to ritual and things like that. Even if we like take that into a secular sense, I do identify mostly as a religious fictionalist and even maybe a moral fictionalist on top of that. I want to hear your opinions.
Well, if you don't mind, real quick, explain both of those terms to me, because both of those words, I think I know what each of those words mean individually, but combined like that, I'm not positive that I know. Like sympathetic magic. Do you know what sympathetic magic is? It's voodoo.
Absolutely.
Like I didn't know that. I heard that term and I was like, I know it's sympathy. But what do you mean by the religious fictionalist and moral fictionalist?
So religious fictionalism is taking the ideas of like scripture and things like that and reinterpreting it through a lens in which you can take it at its face value and not apply anything supernatural to it. You can actually, have you ever LARPed before? Like you actually gone into like a D&D game and you find out that like you start taking on some attributes of these characters you're playing and you just take that home with you sometimes. The idea of religious fictionalism is taking all of the things in religion that people take for granted, like the props of like the communion in Christianity, for instance. It is a prop. It's a cookie and a glass of wine, and that's the blood and body of Christ. So we're already using these role play aspects when it comes to religion stuff. It's sort of like a game for adults, but it's a very serious game. It's a game that influences what happens in our society.
Okay.
And moral fictionalism, specifically the finish off religious fictionalism, is it is a way of engaging in that language because the language is useful. We did benefit a lot from religion over time, but it is starting to outlive its usefulness.
Interesting.
And so there are things
Very
we need to evolve from, and the only way we can do that is to take the things that matter in religion, the way that we have evolutionarily sort of, I guess, aspired to a higher way of existence or aspired to a better version of yourself. Sort of like a mental alchemy sort of thing. Like you are making yourself into the best possible version. Now, that doesn't mean you have to take any supernatural aspects literally, but it does mean that you should take your mythology seriously, just not literally.
Okay. Can we do you mind if we pause right there and then we'll
Absolutely.
get the other definition in a sec, because I already have some interesting thoughts. One, I think I think there's some parts of this I would say that I've been kind of engaging in myself. I think one of the words that came to mind as you were talking is syncretism, which is the idea that has happened, throughout cultures and histories all over the globe, where people take kind of one concept over here and then this other concept that they've been doing, and they kind of like sort of mold them into some brand new thing. So yeah, I think there is value in that in general. But the thing I really wanted to touch on for a second was your expression of ritual and the value of that in human culture. I absolutely agree. And I think that we have, for understandable reasons, let me just say that first, for understandable reasons, I think we have shunned ritual on the non-religious side in a way that I think is problematic. Because the ritual isn't the issue. It's the underlying belief structure that is either demonstrably false or has no reason to be accepted as true, right? Like the idea of us gathering together and all standing up in unison and raising our hands and saying, shamalama ding dong, like that's cool. There's value in that for us as people. That's why we have bowling leagues. I mean, like, yes, people like bowling, but it is the ritual of getting together regularly. It is the ritual of putting on the jersey, putting on the shoes. Like that type of stuff is just a human thing, right? And I would say largely the stuff that I have found to be of great value in the religious context seems to me to end up with that, where it's like, yeah, it's not so much about the religion, like I see Christians doing this. I see Hindus doing this, I see these pagans over here acting like this. I can find in any scripture anywhere in the world that are all written by people for sure, may have had a divine influence. I don't know, but definitely we know a person put pen to paper. They all seem to say this thing about like, we should be nice to each other. And it's like, well, that doesn't seem divine to me. That seems very core human. That's why I tend to go like the secular humanist type of route, right? Not, like I can't say it's perfect. Nothing is, but yeah, I would just really hardcore agree with the ritual of it. And I understand why a lot of us on the deconstructed, atheist, whatever word you want to use, I understand why we are averse to that, especially with those of us that have had traumatic experiences, right? I get why you start to see somebody passing around a plate, asking for 10%, and you kind of tense up in your chest. I understand, but I do agree with you there. I think that's something we should do a better job of. And I'm not positive how exactly we do that, to be honest. But
yeah,
yeah.
I don't think there's simple solutions to it regardless. I think that this is why it's a path that's ultimately called to me, because I take these things extremely seriously. And by the way, if you hear a child screaming in the background, I do apologize.
It's fine.
I have gone back and forth between because there is a thing in religion, which is just this call to that higher self. Like I've mentioned before, you can't really describe it unless you experience it. It's just either it's an evolutionary thing that's been instilled with you since you were a child and people have gone around to you and they've instilled it in you communally, and they'll talk to you about like how God is a higher being than you. You can't really grasp onto it. I think it's ineffable because that it's something you're meant to grasp at. You're never supposed to achieve it. So
Hmm.
looking at it
Okay.
that way, you sort of are always climbing a mountain, but there is no top to the mountain. You just have an
Ah,
endless mountain.
I know what you're talking
Okay.
about. I know what you're talking about. Like,
Mhm.
I talked to this person a while ago, and it stuck with me. It was very profound. And I'm not sure I agree with his views. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I think there's at least a grain of truth to this. He told me that technology and everything that makes our life super easy is harming us in significant ways, right? We we live our lives and we don't ever have to really work really hard and have this goal, this carrot dangling like right in front of us, pushing us forward through life. It's every a lot of stuff is just handed to us. It's just here. You know, we have machines, we have AI. You know, why do we need to do anything anymore, right? And he said that if we got rid of all that and just worked for a living, worked hard for our food, you know, hunted, gathered food, farmed, you know, whatever, what have you, that that would like increase our happiness because we'd have something driving us. We'd have this
Mm.
drive to do stuff. Is that
Well,
kind of the same thing as what you're saying here?
Absolutely. But I think that religion is codifying that drive, and
Hmm.
that it's
okay.
always been codifying that drive. And I think that the reason that these religions got so big is because somebody was able to personify that drive or try to present it in such a way that made it compelling enough for people to go like, hey, if I do this, like how many times have you heard from Christians that like Christianity isn't a label, it's an action?
Oh
That
yeah,
like the only way you can be a Christian
it's
is
a
to
relationship.
perform it.
Hmm.
And so
Absolutely,
like
absolutely.
and so, like, eventually the goal is that if you remember, Paul talks about raising the Christ in yourself. It's not about Christ dying on the cross. It's about becoming Christ-like.
Sure.
So you're just taking on those aspects. But eventually we're starting to get better people than Christ to start emulating. And
Well,
nobody likes that. And so we've had throughout the years things like New Age groups and people like Rudolf Steiner and Manly P. Hall who have tried to reinterpret Christianity and put it into an occultic lens in which Christ is evolving and it speaks to a deeper level of human interaction. And
so
I think that's powerful in its own right.
so I totally think there is a lot that both of y'all just said that I agree with, right? This idea that there is a general moving forward. There is this general kind of we get out of bed and we start doing stuff, and a lot of times it's only after the fact that we're really going like, man, why did I immediately go to the kitchen and start making breakfast? Like, normally I go brush my teeth first, or I put on my slippers, or like what that what it is like to be us, right, is powerful. And I completely agree that it seems to be the case. There is something about us as humans. Without that, it's really difficult to um it's really difficult for us to do anything in life. I mean, honestly, right? Like that's where we get all these various, mental illnesses, right? And we have all these various problems in the world, and we constantly are wanting to not only have that drive, but feel like that drive is worthwhile, right? Like it can't just be, I want to do the thing. It also has to be, this has value to me in some way. And I think that, again, totally agree. I think that is incredibly, insanely important, and absolutely a place where we, on the, again, broadly speaking, non-religious, deconstructed, whatever label there, we don't do a perfect job with that. I think, though, this is where I get into my my secular, my atheist feels here, okay? I think the answer really is better on the non-religious side. I really do think we've got better answers for those types of things, like I've got a bunch of friends that are religious, because, like I said at the beginning of this, we do conversations every month, and so obviously I have to know some Christians to be able to get them out there to talk to me. So we get together regularly and we talk about stuff as we eat tacos and have coffee and shit. And you know, oftentimes they will discuss, "Hey man, what do you do when you have those days you wake up, you feel like crap?" You know, like, I'm sure at some point in your life, SR, you've had something happen to you that made you feel so bad that all you wanted to do was just immediately leave and go home and cry. And it's like, well, yeah, of course. Like, yeah, I'm a person. I have emotions. And it's like, well, what do you do? What do you do? That's the big question, right? And I think the answers to that hope, meaning, and purpose, I think the answers to that, how do I keep going in the difficult times? I really do think those answers are better on the non-religious side. I don't think we have to appeal to religion and to the supernatural or divinity or anything to get all of the best things that we want without any of the worst things that we want. Only through religion do you get some of the most messed up and weirdly harmful things that nobody else could justify, other than if, ghosts and afterlife are real. Then it's like, well, yeah, I mean, if ghosts and afterlife are real, I mean, of course you got to act like that. But anyway, I'm sorry.
No, I completely agree. But I guess to me, so like the secular side does have a lot of really good answers. And I think that's extremely important. I think it's brought a lot to the table. But at the same time, I do see what the religious side has brought as well. I don't think the supernatural is relevant anymore. I think that a lot of their answers are more emotionally resonant.
Yes.
And I think that if there's a way to engage in that emotional resonance, but also understand that we as human beings, even though we're emotionally driven, we also have to satisfy that rationality that makes us what we are. And so that's where the secular comes in. That's why this thing that I'm currently trying to start talking about a bit more is that if we can unify those two things, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen within 100 years. It's not going to happen maybe in 300 years. But at the same time, we have these two opposing sides that are beating each other to death over nothing. Ultimately, it's in powerful emotions driving people on both sides of the fence. Even because, like, one side, on the secular side, you see all of the harm religion has brought. And on the religious side, they're thinking, well, what about all the good shit we're bringing and what we'll lose?
Sure.
And
yeah. And sorry if I kind of cut you off. I'm excited because I agree with you. There's so much here that I think is really important stuff for a lot of people, again, in the broadly atheist, non-religious, whatever kind of label, secular, whatever, right? There's so many of us that overlap with all of those labels. And we have for a long time, and again, I totally understand, like, there is a reason that Dr. Marlene Winnell was able to coin the term, religious trauma, right? Like that absolutely exists. And so I understand why there's so many of us that look to the other side and are very hesitant to even engage in similar activities. Like, I know atheists that are like, man, we can't do a potluck because that's what the Christians do. And I'm like, what? So now we don't get to have friends? We can't have
now
friends
we don't have
because
fun anymore.
Right?
No
Like,
more
we're not
fun.
allowed to go to like, we can't go to a comedy show because Muslims go to a comedy show. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, that's crazy.
That sounds exactly like that. I'm sorry to interrupt. That sounds exactly like what like people back in the 30s and 40s would used to say when they're listening to music on the radio, and then they would later find out the artist is like a different ethnicity than they thought, and suddenly they couldn't like that music. It's like, I can't listen to it anymore.
Yeah,
Sam, because damn it, they're good, but like I can't listen to it anymore because I know that I shouldn't like it. This is weird.
Sam Cooke, a black singer in the 30s, 40s, 50s era, was told explicitly, if you don't have an all-white choir backing you, people won't listen to you. He is still played on the radio today, I mean, people love his voice. you know, dozens and dozens of singles. But yes, you're right, totally. It's a silly, there's this silly mindset, unfortunately. I mean, it's irrationality, right? That's unfortunately
But it comes
just as
from a good
much
place.
in,
Unfortunately, it comes
in
from like
some,
a very strong place.
yeah, in the sense of like looking at the high control groups and saying things like, look, there are certain behaviors and practices that if one engages in as an institution, it just pretty much necessarily leads to harm. And we should be very wary of any group that practices anything that is similar. The problem is that the Manson family also sat around the dinner table and ate food together, you know? So like, so what? Do we have to starve ourselves because we can't even do anything that resembles? No, we can put safeguards in place. There can be transparency and structures that are set up in institutions where it allows for people to be able to actually be respected and be safe whenever they voice criticisms of the institution, right? Like the idea that decisions are made in a smoke-filled room in the basement, locked doors, you know, dark, that doesn't exist, right? You can put things in place that make it so that that stuff doesn't happen, right? There will always be bad people. That's just going to be if anybody thinks otherwise, like, I don't know, I guess come up here and talk to us and we'll try to SE your way out of that. But I mean, like it's you're always going to have something like that, but there are known systems, known institutions. The Catholic Church. I'm sorry, I don't even know why I'm coughing. The Catholic Church, known institutions that actively do things that make it more likely for this harm. And so, yes, we need to, on the non-religious side, we need to look over at the religious communities and say, look, here are the places that they are doing things right, and these are good, right? Getting children into a community center where they are learning science and they are painting and they are playing sports outside of their regular education. That's awesome. That's huge, right? Kids in sports, stay off the streets. Kids off the streets, stay off drugs, man. Awesome. Beautiful. What a wonderful world, right? Like, but they also maybe do some of that psychological trauma with the whole telling them that they'll be tortured forever if they even at any point in their life get horny. So maybe there is a way to do the first thing.
It is what it is.
Maybe there's a way to do the first thing without the second thing, right? That's what I'm going for. And I do think there are some, I'll mention one group I absolutely love. Bridge City is this new organization started up, you know, really within the last year, is all about secular community, is all about providing that space for people and giving people that chance to come together and learn from each other and grow and lift each other up, you know. So definitely, I mean, they're a place that I love. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing right now is very focused on this as well, because I do think we have a fight, man. We got a hill to climb on our side. So they've been doing that church stuff for, I don't know, a couple of thousand years. So, moral fictionalist. What? I think there was something about that we wanted to touch on. What was that? And then we'll grab somebody else.
Okay, that's fine. This is sorry. This is a whole other different can of worms, but we can largely agree that I mean, I'm going to see if y'all agree with this, that moral systems are largely constructed by society.
Yeah. Again, I'm in the generally speaking, like moral non-realist kind of camp. Like I think when we're talking about morality at the end of the day, you know, more or less we're in this kind of boat of saying like, I don't like that, you know, like.
Yeah, so you're on the same page as me, because to me, so like the way I look at this is that morality comes from an emotive response. It's an emotional knee-jerk we have towards a specific thing presented to us. If a child gets hurt, if we're very fond of children, you might go like, okay, what the hell? It's not childishly simplistic like boo child murder or like yay child murder. It's not
Right.
simplistic like that, like it'll
Right.
be presented. But it is an emotional drive.
Right.
And then individual people, they don't always share that. There's always somebody who'll be like, well, actually, I don't mind hurting a child or something like that. And that's why we have prison systems. But ultimately, I think that we take those emotional knee jerks and the collective bodies of all these people getting together and conversing back and forth over these emotional knee jerks. We eventually construct moral systems to sort of put us all on an even playing field we all agree to go by. And so, because we're all under this emotional playing field, I'm sorry, what is it? Not an emotional playing field. It's all under this codified moral system that will have branches off because not everybody's going to agree. And the more people group together, they go and they'll produce their own ideas. It's the idea that morals don't actually exist outside of those emotive knee jerks, but through our own reasons for why we express those emotions or hearing other people's reasons why they experience those emotions, we end up eventually changing our own knee-jerk reactions. Because the more experience we take in from other people and how they react to things, we will then internalize that, and then that will become our new emotional knee-jerk.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, maybe.
when So when we're dealing with moral systems in regard to all moral fictionalism is saying is that even though morals don't objectively exist outside of like these systems we've constructed and we're all different on the individual level, but by whatever degree that is, we all agree to play by this game because it's a successful game to play and it's better for yourself and for the majority of people that you do care about. Because some people in that emotional knee jerk, they accompany a lot more individuals than just themselves. And because it's all societally driven, that's what we got.
Yeah, I think there's again, like, I'd say the vast majority of that just off the rip, I'm broadly in line with. I listen to I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Lance Bush. He's a moral non-realist. I've listened to some of his stuff and I've enjoyed how he kind of breaks it down, and he's talked with a few other people. I've heard him speak with Dr. Alex Malpass as well. I like a lot of his stuff too. But yeah, I find it very, very difficult to understand any system of morality that, and I know this isn't the correct understanding, but just like broadly speaking, just for simplicity's sake here, like it is hard for me to see a moral system that doesn't at the end of the day basically result in somebody just saying, I don't like this. This doesn't make me feel good. I don't prefer that. I'd rather it be something else because that makes me happier, and that presents a lot of problems. And I understand why people don't want to accept that. It was funny. I was actually visiting my mom not too long ago, and she's known for a while that I grew up religious. And so, I deconstructed later on. And it was the first time ever when I was visiting her and we were sitting around with family that we had ever really talked about like this whole like atheism of it all thing, with me. And there was a point where I said to my mom, I said, right, like we'd been going for like 30, 40 minutes. And I went, right. Right. But kind of what I'm saying, Mom, is, if all that stuff is true that I just said, then, like there's probably not an afterlife. So I don't think there is one. And my mom just looked back at me and she goes, yeah, that's kind of a bummer. And I was like, yeah, hey, yeah, look. We don't have to talk about this anymore, right? We can
Yeah. It's like I didn't choose this reality that I think I'm experiencing. I'm just experiencing it. It sucks.
Right.
Like, what am I supposed to do? Lie?
Right. I genuinely wish like it was as easy as you could just walk up to a friend tomorrow and just go like, oh man, did you see the paper? And they're like, no, what happened, man? And oh yeah, look at this. Ethics, man. Yeah. Got it. You have to now. And then they just go, oh, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, look, there it is. Morality. We found it. Like, but it just doesn't, it genuinely doesn't seem to be that, you know? And so
Absolutely. Like, that's
great
one
if
of the
they were
things that
different.
irritates me is because in these theistic systems, by the way, I'm an agnostic. I'm not necessarily atheist
Sure.
or yes, I have a way of looking at it, but we'll talk about that later if I ever get a chance again to talk with you because you're really cool. But the thing is, you'll see all these people in these philosophical circles. We'll talk about we are all climbing a mountain, and it's always the language of a mountain. It's always like we are climbing uphill, but no one ever seems to reach that top. And so, like, we're getting to this thing to where here's what's more societal, what promotes more societal cohesion. Here's what tends to be better for societies and makes people more secure, and why security matters for societal cohesion. And even though we have this emotional component to it, I think that's mostly what feeds into moral conversations, people who are moral realists. Because they're looking at this thing of like, oh, it's getting better and better. And if we just keep pretending it gets better and better, eventually we'll get to the bestest. And it's like, what is bestest? Like, is that even a word? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be some way you can improve something. If you introduce a new concept, you're going to have to improve it. And so in that way, it's always a fiction. It's always just something someone wrote down because it was the best way they thought it would affect other people. And that's why when I look at religions, I see it as somebody had an idea and they looked at the world around them and it sucked. That's why Gnostics were all about, man, fuck the human body, fuck physicality, all that, just all God, space God ever. Not even the God they worship. That's the demiurge. That made this shit place. I want to go beyond it. And like that's what that all is. It's all somebody getting these ideas, codifying them because they believe it's going to be better for people overall. Whether that leads to a good outcome or not is a completely different discussion.
For sure. And I think that's where a lot of times we end up talking about what the results are of these various systems. And that makes sense. I totally get that. But I really do feel like the results that we've had for so long now really do seem to indicate that they're, I mean, kind of like what the first person was saying tonight about, this kind of, I mean, almost in the same sense as a Kantian like moral imperative, right? Like people have to act, they're forced to. And it's like, yeah, but that just isn't the case, Like, and I remember
what system is what I always ask.
Right. Who's effective with that? Like, who the crap gets it right 100% of the time and convinces everybody all the time? Like, call me because I have a lot of people that I would like to convince. But yeah, I don't see that in the real world. And because of that, that is a huge indicator to me that, man, it just, I don't know. I really don't know about this whole written on my heart stuff. That really seems like it's far-fetched. Maybe morality is like a law of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism, but I still struggle with that. It's still tough. So
When I hear that,
Can I ask you a question? Oh, go on, Pierce.
When I hear that written on my heart statement, years ago, I would probably just be like, poo-poo that, right? And I see it a little bit differently now. Maybe it's because I'm interpreting the words different, and maybe I am. Maybe written on my heart means you know what to do in every single situation. I'm not reading it that way. The way I'm reading that is that you will ultimately, hopefully, be able to figure out what to do, right? Because what's written on your heart is, and I think this applies to most people, probably not all people, they just care about other people, love other people.
Yeah. The way I've always looked at it is that that's them telling on themselves, like where it actually comes from. Like, not that it's a bad thing, because it's a sweet sentimentality that like everything that I know about how to be a human being and to love my fellow brothers and sisters on this planet all come from the fact that I have emotions. And like the reason they're all going to their heart is because like I will know when I feel empathetic towards something and how my empathy will influence me. they don't realize that your empathy can sometimes be extremely faulty. Because sometimes you'll be empathetic for the wrong thing. There's a reason you have Nazi sympathizers versus someone who's just homeless and they don't have anywhere to go.
I want to cut you short there. Sorry, I tried to interrupt. Can you be sympathetic towards a Nazi, towards the person, the human being, but not for whatever actions or beliefs they hold?
I mean,
I would say
probably,
absolutely
but
yes.
That's not.
I mean,
yeah,
like,
but I don't think that's what
Okay.
a Nazi sympathizer is, right?
no,
Like, I
Nazi
don't think-
sympathizers like
but-
with the idealism of Nazis.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like
Okay.
that's what I
it's
would-
like what they
Yeah.
stand for and like what their goal is.
yeah,
And like
that-
they'll be empathetic towards like, well, maybe these Jewish people are actually the root of all these problems, because I see a lot of problem with the Jewish people in my life, and like, you know, and that can turn into what it is, which is horrifying. But like
I'd
can
call
look
that
at
a Nazi. Just you're a Nazi then, right?
Well, I think it's so like being a Christian isn't entirely actions and it's not entirely belief, but it's some combination of the two.
Okay.
And I think that's the
it's a
distinguishing
middle ground
between-
thing.
I think that's the distinguishing between Nazi and Nazi sympathizer is like Nazi is the full-fledged goose stepping, you know, some bitches, right? And like, yeah, totally round them, you know, whatever. And then the
And a
Nazi
sympathizer is yay.
and the sympathizer is the one on the sideline that's like, you know, maybe this is all right. This is okay. Like, I'm not fully supportive and maybe I'm not getting an armband, but I think it's just it's that degree. Like let me put it like this. It's the
Almost like romanticizing it.
yeah, maybe yeah.
To a degree.
Yeah, yeah, I think there's a bit of that to it.
It's hard to put down. I mean, like, I think that this language is old, by the way, because I don't think Nazi sympathizers used a lot today because,
That's
like, you know,
true.
we sort of
We just call
kicked
them
the literal dog
neo-Nazis,
shit out of them.
I think.
And now
I
we
think
call
we
them
just
neo-Nazis.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's
And
yeah.
And so I think to answer your question, me, I would definitely sympathize with someone. I can look at somebody who's in a state of hatred and a state of background that like they don't understand quite themselves, or that they've been trapped like environmentally. You know that this is how they were molded. It doesn't mean they're lost, but it's sad that you might not be able to reach them.
Okay. Yeah, you see the person underneath the beliefs, underneath all the possible trauma, whatever might have you, that has led them to this terrible conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just
Yeah.
I would totally agree in the sense of saying like I understand why it happens. I do. But it does not justify it, and it is always incorrect to go down the route of dehumanization, in my opinion. I think that is in any scenario, it does not matter who the person is that you disagree with or is doing the terrible actions. Hitler was a human who did these horrible things, and he should have been stopped, and we should reject the ideology. But he is a person, and we shouldn't shy away from the fact that being a human being means you have this potential to do these incredible great things like Jonas Salk and save millions of children, right? And you also have this unfortunate, terrible ability to destroy generations of you know, people, right? That is all part of the human existence. And just because somebody is doing terrible things, no, they may in fact be incredibly human in that moment. We need to push back against those things and say that is something we all have, and we should shun that. We should not want to behave in that way. We should not have those ideologies, right? That's
See,
what
this is. No, I'm sorry, Secular.
no, please.
I'm just saying that this is one of those things that I think I struggle with, honestly. As someone who
I
is
get it.
where he is, because like there is a point for me to where an action is performed and then my brain just shuts off for care for you. Like there is a line for me that like once it's crossed, it's like no matter how idealistic I want to be about how sympathetic I am, it's like you performed something, my brain's gonna shut off all care. I don't care what happens to you. And this is something I work on in myself.
And
But to me, there is a line.
And I get that, right? And I think the only thing I will say, and this is always a difficult thing to do, right, is in every situation, right? We should always want to ask ourselves, who am I being?
100%.
Who am I in this moment that makes my interlocutor, that makes my boss, that makes my friend, that makes my, who am I being right now that makes this response warranted, right? Now, that doesn't mean that we just sit there and allow people to abuse us. That is not what I hey, I am just a big fan of looking in the mirror before we look out the window, you know? And that can be tough. And believe me, I'm right there with you sometimes. There's some people that I am very glad I did not interact with them in a recorded space because I definitely said some not kind things.
It
I echo
happens
pretty
to the
much
best of us.
pretty much everything you said. But there's a little bit more to it for me. Like, if you do run into someone with these horrible opinions, views, perspectives, right? And they want to do these things, whatever. I think you have to approach it with a thoughtful strategy. I think if you run up to them and say some of the awful things like you were suggesting, right? Like, what is that? Is that going to solve the problem? Is that going to have them repent and say, "I'm sorry, SR, I was so bad. You're so right." They're probably not going to hear that. They're probably not going to hear your message.
Sure.
They're probably going to double down and believe it even more confidently, right? They're like, "I can't believe that asshole. Like, shit, I know I'm right," right? So
Yeah. And I would say just yes. And I would say, yes, we have to be intentional about what our goals are in these interactions and asking ourselves regularly throughout the engagement, what am I doing here? You know, I remember hearing Dr. Daryl Ray say it, years ago. Somebody called in, they said, I want to tell my mother, all about why the Jehovah's Witnesses is shit and stuff. And Daryl goes, well, what do you want to be the result out of this? Do you want your mom to hate you and not talk to you again? Because if you do want that, like, I've got some things you can say to her. I will give you the list, right? If what you want is you want your mom to understand that you're coming from a place of compassion and that you care about them, right? Then you would probably take a different approach, right? And all I would say is, yes, absolutely that. What is our motivation? What is our goals? And then on top of that, are we accomplishing those? And are we willing to reevaluate some of our methods and some of our systems and stuff? And that's one of the things I do love about street epistemology is that opportunity to kind of say to yourself, like, am I really engaging correctly here? Am I accomplishing what I want out of this interaction? And we won't always be perfect, but we should hopefully continue to make those moderate corrections and try to get back to, look, I'm just gonna tell you right now, I know some people in the space. I know what their goal is, and their goal is to get out there and call every motherfucker a motherfucker. I know those people, and they've told me that. And you know what? I can tell you, they do it. They accomplish that. That is exactly my goal, I'd say.
I always try to walk the path of peace. So what
Yeah.
just be lovey-dovey for a second in my own mind state. But I don't know. Sometimes I feel like there are some people you only reach by shock and awe. There are a lot of people who can be convinced, and there are a lot of people in certain ways that if you come at it a kind way, they might alleviate that immediate apprehension. But then there are some people that the moment you have stepped into even a conversational arena, even if it's like a very professional setting, it is war. It's like you are an enemy. You're already dehumanized in their eyes. And at that point, it's not necessarily about being kind to them. It's about hitting them in those pressure points that make them recognize their ground isn't as steady as they thought it was.
Mhm.
And once their foundation is ripped away, then you can calm that down a bit and go like, hey, look, and this is why your position just fell apart.
Have
It's not
you-
that. Go on.
No, I'm so sorry. No, please keep going.
No, you're perfectly good. I think you got my point.
I was just gonna say, have you ever do you know who Daryl Davis is?
I was
Have
gonna
you
say
ever heard
that.
of him? Yeah, I love so much of what he does, and he's a fascinating individual because, just so you know, the things that I am about to tell you about this man, he also, while he's been doing all of this, has also been a professional like saxophone player for like I don't remember if it was like the E Street Band for Bruce Springsteen or something, but he's incredible. It's a fascinating dude,
Well,
right?
Incredible.
He has spent Daryl Davis has spent decades talking with various members of KKKs, all chapters all around the country. He has, to his credit, gotten multiple different chapters to end up closing by having, conversation with them and speaking with them as a friend and as a person and all of this stuff. What I love to get people to watch of his, because I think this is so fascinating and I really respect the crap out of him for doing this. He'd been doing that, talking to a bunch of white supremacists and stuff for years, right? And he decided one day he was going to sit down with a bunch of people in the Black community that knew exactly what he was doing and really fucking disagreed. And that is one of my favorite videos to show people, because I think there is so much from that you can learn and you can grow from seeing the people respond to him and telling him, here are the places I think you really did a bad job, man. This is messed up, It is really, really interesting. The people that disagree with, I don't even know what the video was. I don't know how you could find it.
What's his name?
Daryl Davis, Darryl. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I know how to find it. I think they're talking about the meeting in Baltimore, I believe. And if
he's like sitting in a restaurant or something, yeah.
If you look up the movie, oh shoot, I don't remember what it is. If you type in movie and Daryl Davis, I bet it will come up on YouTube. It's completely free.
It's really,
okay.
Really
I got him
great.
on YouTube right now. I found a TED Talk with him. I'm gonna look into this guy.
Yeah, super interesting. And then again, also go check out his music stuff too, man, because I didn't know that he did all that stuff for years. I was
Bruce
like,
Springsteen? Are you kidding me? Like,
I don't remember if it's the E Street Band or what band it is, but he's been like a saxophone player for some like rock band for years. I swear. I just it was so wild, but
I'll definitely check it out. I just have one more question. Specifically, the thing that sort of started me figuring out this this higher ideal thing we talked about earlier, to where like that mountain without a top climbing. There's a concept in occult circles, which is called an egregore. Have any of y'all ever heard of that?
Not off the top of my head. It's not ringing.
So in occultic circles, an egregore is basically their names for gods. Eventually, at some point, they came up with the idea that gods were constructed for city-states and for tribes. And that basically, because people aligned with those ideas, their gods could win and lose against other nations. So if that was their way, but they actually put some power into it, they're like their own reasoning. The way I would look at it is like, that's exactly what it is an egregore. It's a thought form. It's this idea that everybody latches onto, but it's not existent outside of the people latching onto it. It's just a concept that becomes useful for the tribe.
Yeah.
And that's why people do so much maintenance.
Yeah.
And so
I would totally agree with you. There's been some times on like the Atheist Experience show where, I'm talking with somebody for like 45 minutes and they're telling me how they love their God and their God's a big deal and all this stuff. And I was like, and we finally get to a place where they're just like, well, yeah, man, like my God's just like love. It's just like a concept. And I'm like, well, geez, shit, man. Like we could have saved ourselves a lot of time. I agree conceptually, God exists. Like, I know that unicorns are an idea. A friend of mine has a unicorn tattoo. Like, I know they're a thing, but like, are you ever going to go walk through a forest anywhere and like find one? No, like, that's not, no, you know? But so, yeah, if we're on that side of it, then it's like, I'm totally on board. Like, I agree. I think absolutely it's this amalgamation of desires and hope and purpose and, you know, an understanding for some of these questions that we don't know great answers to, history, blah, blah, all of that stuff. Absolutely. But, you know, I always take the next step because some people tell me I'm a little bit more in that like anti-theist camp, which fine, whatever. I would take the next step and be like, can we have all that good stuff without it having to be a god or anything? Could we have all that awesome stuff that we really value and we love without any of this reference, any of this baggage? And I think we can. I think we do have some answers, but they're kind of tough. And like my mom said, they are kind of a bummer at first. I think you could get past it, but yeah, you're going to be a little depressed for a while. I'm so sorry. Come hang with us, I guess.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think we're on the same page. It's just me, the way I'm looking at it is like, how do we effectively move on from this?
Yeah.
Because I think that a lot of on the theist side of the fence, you will see people say like, well, you're breaking down all these systems we have up, but you're not replacing it with anything, which we've talked about that. Like that people need to work on community more, and we
Yeah.
need to work on these replacements. And I think the way we do that is a fusion of the two. I think we have to recognize that there are things that humanity is outgrowing as a collective, and that if you personally believe these things, that's fine. But that's something that's got to be worked on a personal level. You can't really take that into the societal area anymore, unless you're just getting around like-minded people. But I think it's not easy. It's not easy to come up with a solution to this. But I think that's ultimately where it's going to be. It's ultimately going to be acknowledging where we came from and where we have to go.
Yeah, and I'll definitely just kind of double down on that sentiment you said about like we have to build stuff up. What I've started saying to people is I've done the deconstruct and I've done the breakdown for a couple of years now, and I think it's awesome that we do that, right? I think it's so freaking cool that people will tear things apart and rip down the facade. Absolutely. I love the deconstruct. I love the breakdown. But now I'm ready to build. I'm ready to grow. I'm ready to put structure in place that allows for a long-term societal change. That's what I think we need to do. I appreciate the people that want to throw tomatoes at the churches and tell them that their God is fake. I love it. Hey, man, it's great. You know, I needed it myself. I needed some of those moments, right? Now that I have had that, now that I have had that opportunity, I love it. I appreciate it. Where do we go? What do we do? I mean, exactly what you said. What is the next step? And I think that's where my focus is, you know, broadly speaking right now, is how do we provide this opportunity for people to create more chances for connection and community in their lives? How do we provide a space where people feel comfortable to be able to say, look, I don't know so much about this, and I'm kind of, what do you think? You know, like, how do you deal with that? Like, that is a beautiful opportunity I think we have. And if we're intentional about it, I think it'll be unstoppable. I think in a few years' time, there won't be a way to reverse it. Everybody will want to constantly be out there talking with each other, communicating, understanding, learning, growing, changing. Like, that is a possibility. It really is. But again, we actually just have to give a shit enough to try for it.
Exactly.
So that is always the hard part.
We've just got to stop stabbing at egregores and start making some of our own. Is basically the way I've been thinking of it. But yeah, it just one last thing on top of this to just like provide the divide here, so it doesn't seem like I'm only promoting religious fictionalism and moral fictionalism. I think that there's another solution that's been sort of being worked out. It's called post-theism. I haven't seen so much language on it, but it has been being put forward. It is sort of the same thing. It's just we accept, like they accept sort of the constraints of the tradition, but also they recognize that God is like their main thing is that God is a step in evolution that we needed to get to where we are, and now we need to drop it. And so like that's the way that they look at it. So I want to try to provide some nuance and not just say that, hey, I've got the answer. No, I'm just someone who found something that's working personally at the moment.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I dig that. Again, I think there's a lot that we got we're on the same page on, so I appreciate it.
okay, you have a great day. Let's just like get some
All right.
other else up here.
Sure.
Yeah,
we'll catch
bully
you later.
somebody into coming up.
All right.
We'll
Yeah,
just
well-
say inflammatory things until somebody raises their hand. That's what I found.
Well, that could work, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't have anything. I don't have anything super inflammatory to say at the moment, but
Talk
No,
some
I
shit
think-
about Taco till he angrily takes the stage.
But man, I appreciate that. If anybody, of course, please, I mean, throw your hand up. We still got a little bit of time, so if you're out there, otherwise, I don't know. Pierce and I are probably just gonna chat. Oh, see,
Oh, we got
Wise
someone.
Ape was like, yeah, Wise Ape instantly was like, that is a bad idea. Let's not do that. Like anything but just y'all two talking.
Oh man.
Hey,
Well,
what's up?
no, not at all. Hey, so this support that humanity needs, do you think it's AI, right?
Hmm. I don't.
I'm not sure. What do you mean by that? I guess I'm not positive. I know.
I
Exactly
don't know
what
if it would be like replacing the institutions, right? I don't know if it would be Neuralink or something, but ultimately, I think everybody should be touched by it, right, and supported by it. And I think, this new tool is something greater than any institution could be, right? Like
How does this
to
work?
touch on what the
Explain this to me. I'm not grasping it.
Mm-hmm.
well, all the answers all the questions, right, that could cause suffering or turmoil or depression or nihilism could be worked out in AI and then given to whoever is living.
Okay.
So I don't know that I'm as confident in that. I think there's a lot of stuff a lot of problems and a lot of issues that could be alleviated, right? But I don't know that we'd get rid of everything, right? With AI. I think we'd still end up with, like, for instance, I think we'd still end up with a human who wakes up one day on a Tuesday and has, in all reasonable metrics, has no reason to feel sad or unloved or anything, right? They've got a loving family around them. They've got a bunch of friends. They're super successful in business, like all the things, right, that we all normally attribute to the happiness and whatnot. I think they'll probably still wake up on a Tuesday and feel sad sometimes, I don't know that AI will completely alleviate. It might give us better answers to help with that as it arises, but I don't know that it'll just like wipe it all. I don't think it'll wipe out poverty entirely. I don't think it'll wipe out it sure won't wipe out, at the very least, I think it won't wipe out things like natural disasters or illness or anything, right? Like I don't think it's not going to get rid of cancer as a concept or anything.
Yeah, actually, I think it'll play a part in every category. Like, so there's a lot of categories there. But we could pick one, right? And yeah. So just probably mental states. it could really support that area, right? And like you said, post scarcity society. I mean, it's just I'll stop there, but you know, um, the religions, right? They propose like this unicorn, right? Like you were saying in the forest, but there's actually nothing there. There's no autonomous agent, like, but with the AI, it's a tool that's actually it is there,
Sure.
right? And if it wanted to, uh, it could help, right?
I'm like so confused here. Can you tell me what you're envisioning this AI is like?
Uh, well, I just ordered a pair of Meta Ray-Ban glasses, right? So I'm now gonna have the AI in my vision,
Okay,
you know,
that's
and just it
cool.
would just continue to be more advanced in that way, and
Is it like an all-knowing type
like this.
situation, or is it limited knowledge? Is it
Well,
just
well,
what
sort of.
humans?
No, it's machine learning,
Okay.
and so it just it really would arrive at the most objective conclusion to
Okay.
all things, making it super efficient. And
Okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I mean, we could talk about like, AI hallucinating as it is right now. I don't think that's a super worthwhile pushback, I'll be honest, because um, you could easily argue that within just the next 2 years of AI advancement, it'll fix all those things, considering literally, I don't know what it was like 45 days ago, somebody said AI couldn't do XYZ, and then we figured it out. So, like we see that all the time. So, like, but I just, I think, again, I think largely speaking, there's a lot that you're saying that I am on board with in the sense of, hey, man, properly utilized artificial intelligence will fix a lot of shit in the world. Like, yeah, I think there is good reason to accept that, right? Like, I think at the very least, what it's going to do is it's going to cut down, if not entirely eliminate, a lot of these bullshit mundane tasks that we're all doing on it. Like, there is so much of the human existence that is standing in lines, just waiting for shit to happen. We turn on the sink and we're just standing there, and it's like, all right, 5 more seconds, 10 more seconds. How long is it going to take? All right, just almost gonna. Okay, it's full. Thank you, God. So, like, I think there's a lot of that type of bullshit that we're doing in our lives that will be alleviated. But I don't know
well,
that. Yeah, go ahead.
think about just paraphrasing, right? Like we've been doing a lot of talking, and we might be a little confused that on where what position everybody's at, right? And it could just like boil things down into like a koan, or I'm not sure
Well,
how to pronounce that, but
no, I agree with you. I totally think, yeah, absolutely. There's an obvious place where there could be great benefit and stuff. I don't know though. I'm not saying that it's a for sure it can't ever, right? I'm just saying currently I'm in the boat of saying I don't think there's a good answer to this. Like, you still just gonna have motherfuckers that are gonna look at that chat GPT summary and just be like, no, I didn't say. Like, that's what they're gonna, so like, what exactly does AI do to alleviate that? I'm not positive
uh,
yet, but maybe there is an
so,
answer.
so I think people could stand on the shoulder of giants, and not everybody is, right. They're way down on the ground. So that's why they're like screaming and fighting and pissed off and confused. They're
Yeah, hey,
just
I'm a big believer in broader education levels increasing, man. Despite what my state funds or chooses not to fund, I think education is important, you know. So I'm with you there, like broadly speaking. But I think there are always going to be these physiological human components that AI won't be able to adequately address. And I don't know. I don't know that I have a good justification for that. I am comfortable in saying, like, you know, when people ask me, they'll say, like, man, you always tell people, you know, change your views and, you know, we're irrational and all this. Like, what are you irrational on? And that might be one of those things. That just might be one of those things, you know. I don't know that I have good solid justification to hold that view right now, but I kind of am in this boat where it's like, yeah, AI is going to help a shit ton, but I don't think it's going to fix it all. But yeah, there is some good stuff there though. I think there's we should be trying to advance that technology more, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of great value to it. I also think there's a lot of potential for problems, right? It's
You don't say.
That's clear, right? Like, saw a video of Trump sucking Musk's toes. Like, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I don't have good reason to accept. I'm just saying I saw that video and I don't feel that video is exactly true. So maybe, but
This is where the morality comes
Imagine
in.
this.
It's not necessarily a bad thing that video
Right.
exists, but it's
Right.
not good neither.
right.
I don't want to see it.
I don't know that it is raising the tide that lifts all boats in human flourishing. I don't know.
Imagine if there was an AI factory that could create a reasonably sized pod for every individual that lives on Earth. So you know, they don't have to worry about being too hot or cold or too hungry. And
Nope.
within it, like, it could also you know, just check the mental state, right? Like, do you have everything you need to go out into the world today, like for this side quest that, you know, you want to pursue?
Yeah, I've heard about the I've heard about the world supposedly that atheists and secularists want, that everybody's stuck in their little pleasure pods, just constantly maximizing utility, you know, just pushing a fucking button, constantly getting morphine. And I'm not saying that I'm against that in entirely. Like, principally, I don't know that I'm against that. I think, you know,
It's just a you know, that to phrase it like that, you know, that it's just making a straw man of the idea, right?
Of course. And I like to be silly with it, you know. It's like, you know, probably try it.
You know, essentially, it's like, you know, what would be so wrong with everybody having a bed? Like,
Yeah.
I think even the most conservative person would be like, yeah, somebody should, you know, everybody should, like, be able to sleep, right?
Yeah,
So it's just
right. Shouldn't be
right.
Shouldn't
So
be
it just
crazy.
it just comes down to labor. Like, well, who's going to pay for all the beds? Well, when we develop tools that, like, no one has to pay for it, right? The AI could figure out how to produce and extract these resources on its own, right? Like, maybe it's just some sort of technology that it just uses the sun for the energy to do that, and
Right.
you know, who knows what type of materials things could be constructed out of. But
And then we live in the Matrix after that.
Hey, let's do it. That's the world. That's what we've been going for, apparently, for years now.
The Matrix is the pleasure pod part, and the robots can just destroy the planet. Use our bodies as batteries.
I'm cool with it. I don't really like trees that much anyway, y'all. Like, they're sort of okay. I mean, I've looked at a few. They look pretty. Shove me in the pleasure pod.
And so, like when I bring up these ideas to theists, they're always the ones to push back the hardest but I don't understand because they're advocating for like the Matrix, really. Like, oh, we're gonna live in this, we're all gonna be transported to this heaven, which is like essentially what I'm saying we can make here, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's I think the concept of the afterlife is one of the really obvious places that indicates that these ideologies were formulated entirely out of tangible physical existence, because it is so fascinating to think that in that type of existence, one that would be the purely spiritual, the purely divine, right? That it would be so reminiscent of this world. That has always been fascinating to me, you know? And again, I do think it's one of those things where, you know, maybe it's not like a perfect, you know, syllogistic fucking argument or anything, but I do think it's a pretty good reason to be skeptical about the truth value of those claims. Why would heaven be anything like Earth? That's stupid, in my opinion. It's so much better. The fact that you are limiting it to such a mundane experience in existence is silly to me. But yeah, wrap us up, Wise, and then
Sure.
we got Andrew. I see. So.
Yeah, I'll wrap us up because I think in secularism and well, you know, we have the potential to create afterlife through, I don't know, figuring out consciousness, what it is, and therefore, you know, how to preserve it and you know, archive it. And it's not that, you know, we have to give up on an afterlife just because we lose theology. It might be actually the only shot at one. So
Yeah, it might be a lot more physical than we've ever pretended and thought about. So yeah, it's not off the table. So hey, if I could, I'll tell you this right now, Pierce. If I could like upload my consciousness into like some fully functioning robot, you know, like right before I die, I'd probably do it. There's a over 85% chance I'd say yes to it right now.
You know,
Um,
that thought freaks me out. I saw this TV show that was based on that premise.
yeah.
And ever since I watched it, it struck something strange within me. It struck this weird thing like, if you transfer your consciousness to like an SSD, right? Storage medium,
Mhm.
and then
Right.
transfer that into a body or a robot or whatever it might be, right? Go into the matrix, whatever. Is that consciousness really you or is it a copy of you?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It freaks me out.
Now,
I don't like thinking about that.
now here's a question though. Does that matter if there's not another version? Does it matter if it's a copy of you if this instantiation is the only one that exists? I know that gets
I don't know.
that gets more into that weird bummer territory my mom didn't want to
Yes,
continue.
exactly. Exactly. It's that bummer
told her-
territory.
I told her that there is a beautiful mountaintop on the other side, but you do have to go through this valley of depression first. And she was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to do that. Like, we're done. So, you know, I get that.
I respect the honesty.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Andrew, what's up?
Howdy. So yeah, interesting thing seeing you start a live event here. So I've seen at least secular. I've seen you up on the Atheist Experience network shows, a little here and there. It's been a little while since I've seen one, mind you, but recognize the face.
Thanks.
Figured I'd see what the chat was about. So we hit a couple of interesting topics, which is why the hand went up. So yeah, some interesting thoughts here. Cause I was hearing a couple of things that looked a lot like some common patterns in the last chain of conversation here. In that idea for AI, and what I'm sort of the feeling I always get from that, as far as vibe goes, really smacks of wanting to have something just give you the answer with authority. And this sounds just like another search for a God to give it all to you. I want something to tell me all the answers and to be authoritative and right, and that I can let go to it.
I think if I wouldn't want that, like me personally, I don't want to just appeal to an authority just for the sake of it being an authority.
I know.
If like
That's
if I
what
knew it was
hearing.
right,
No. Yeah, it's more to that. That's the implication of what was being sought.
Okay. Yeah, then yeah,
I
that
don't
would
know. I do
disagree
not
with.
look for that. This looks like a substitute. This is like saying I left a hierarchy that used to give
Sure.
me all the answers, and now I'm trying to invent a new hierarchy to give me
Right.
all the answers.
So I would say I'm definitely more where Pierce is coming from, and like what my thoughts on how AI will help alleviate a lot of various problems in the world is not because it's an authority. It has nothing to do with the fact that like it's something that is this is really good computers. Like, no, it's literally because it proves it to you in 5 seconds where it would have taken you an hour and a half. In 5 seconds, it demonstrates the entire understanding of the thing that you're asking for, right? And it demonstrably will give you experiments that you can run in your daily life, right? That you can go, oh yeah, if I drop a bowling ball on my foot, it will fucking hurt, like those types of. I don't see it as, I don't see the things that AI becomes most beneficial for. I don't see that as a like, oh no, I don't know this thing, let me check the authority. More so as we know that this type of stuff always has to occur in the background of our daily lives on a regular basis. And if we take even a second to focus on that, we are wasting valuable opportunities that we could be focused on more important advancements, right? And so all of the time spent for meal prepping is done by artificial intelligence, because I don't need to put goddamn Brussels sprouts in a container, man. And a robot can do that. I know that I need Brussels sprouts on Thursday. Put it in the damn Tupperware.
you eat
right?
Brussels sprouts? Why?
No, I no, I don't. I always give examples that don't actually apply to me. Like a lot of people keep coming up to me now and they're like, why do you really want to do a bowling league? And I'm like, no, I don't really care that much about bowling. Like, we talk about it a lot, man. And I'm like, I'm sorry. But does that make a little more sense where I'm coming from on it, Andrew?
It's a very it's a very different direction from what I was trying to highlight. Though it was more on the format that it was presented to you in just previously, where it would give us all those answers. It would tell us all of these things per se. Like I said, it was presented with the idea that it would be taken as authoritative. And that highlights kind of a key issue I've got with AI, which I'll elaborate on in a moment. But you brought up a very interesting point where all this time I was worried about Skynet and I should have been worried about Brussels sprouts.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting place we found ourselves. Don't get me wrong. I've got
computers will force you to eat Brussels sprouts in the future, y'all. I am predicting that now.
This is the true horror to come. Yes, I await my, leguminous overlords. So part of that was what sounded like somebody searching for something just to give them the answers. That was the substitute for God view in my books. But there's sort of a secondary aspect with AI. So you mentioned the value of simplifying the mundane, and I definitely resonate with that. Because hey, anything it can put on a silver platter for you, but this sort of highlights a key aspect of the human condition that I've kind of put a finger on in my books, which is the idea that those who have a certain intelligence and a certain methodology with what they're doing, you can give them tools and they become more powerful, right? Like the person whose brain really excels, you give them the right tool and they will explode in value, right? That's one of the incredible things AI can serve as is one of those tools. Or at the same time, you can hit the flip side for the person who does less and less. Like if you take a look at impacts on things like certain aspects of literacy, where we watch things like cursive skills disappear. If we've noticed more and more online how people can't write a coherent sentence with spelling for if their lives depended on it. Now all of a sudden we see Grammarly taking up over every ounce of advertising space out there. And it's a sad reality of realizing that now these people are becoming dependent on this. And it's almost like I'm feeling that it's sort of like when you depend on something more and more, it's like picture where you're in a wheelchair that gets you in place from A to B real fast, right? So you stop using your legs, but then your legs start atrophying because we become dumber and dumber. So instead of it making us better, it allows us to basically continue to exist, doing less and less as it has the appearance of carrying the work for us. It's a question about how we will react with it. We could become so much better, but it could enable us to allow so much worse and sweep it under the rug.
Yeah,
and I see a huge pattern of that.
Yeah, and I would say that I think, again, broadly, I'm in agreement here in the sense of like a lot of this really depends on how we respond, right?
Oh hell yeah.
Are you familiar with the Wall-E Disney movie?
Yep.
You know
That's what I was thinking.
Oh yeah.
Now,
Thinking about
the next thing I want to ask real quick, just because I love talking about this, because
this
it's
is
wild.
going to be good, I'm sure.
Are you familiar with the crazy story about how all of the Disney movies are in the same universe and they actually are all connected, but they have been put out in different timelines of? Are you familiar with this?
I have not heard this.
It is
this theme.
Wild. Go look it up. It is wild. There is actually some decent, it might be a conspiracy theory. There might be some realness to it, but supposedly all the Disney movies are in the same universe, and A Bug's Life is actually in the timeline after Wall-E. Blow your mind. But okay, anyway, in that movie, right? It's exactly what you're talking about. The people have atrophied to such a ridiculous degree because they have, and in the way that it's portrayed in the movie, it seems to be a bad thing. I think it's pretty clearly obvious they're saying like this type of existence is not something that the creators were saying we should go towards. My kind of response to that would just be that I agree that it's about it's about how we engage with this and about how we respond to it. And it is not inherent that it will get us to those bad outcomes utilizing it. It depends entirely on what systems we put this in place for and what values we still hold, right? When we got to a place that civilization recognized this, I mean, mind-blowing advancement, right? This super crazy idea that if you took a food that we liked and shoved it into the ground, it would make more of that in this place. And you didn't have to just keep running around and trying to find shit, right? Like the moment we got that advancement in technology and civilization and in ideas in general, it opened up an insane opportunity for specialization and focus, right? And so now it could have made us just a bunch of lazy pieces of shit. Like it totally could have, right? Apparently, so far, it's a mixed bag.
It's a mixed bag.
It's a mixed bag. But
you're not wrong.
But if we utilize AI properly, I think, then we're able to get all those great things that we got, because only with farming were we ever able to develop public education. Only through farming were we ever able to develop institutionalized medicine, right? And so what do we do with this opportunity? What do we do with this technology? I 100% agree with you, Andrew. That is undeniably one of the most important things. That's why, kind of, in part, I really do love having, like some of the conversations we had earlier about like morality, and you're like, what's your justification for instantiation of axiomatic, ultimate, whatever, blah, blah, big words, I do love all that stuff. It is fun for me because I think if we have a really good understanding of that, then these types of questions are easier for us to navigate. It won't always be a perfect system, but it is a system that will be as content neutral as possible, right? So that we can pull out any X or Y and swap anything else in, and it's like, hey man, it still works or it still doesn't work. So that's why I like the logic and the morality and all that bullshit that makes most people fall asleep. I get it. But anyway, I'm just kind of rambling there, and I'll shut up because I know we're getting close to the end here. So
Yeah, no, it highlighted a few points there. So again, it is really, like I said, it's a warning based on my view of the human condition. So it's never the technology, right? It's like saying, guns don't kill people per se. This is just saying, like, okay, we're potentially like an irresponsible child over here, and you give us a way to be lazy, and you watch a lot of people do exactly that. And it's part of, like I said, the subservience to it, where if we're willing, like I've been in a lot of conversations where people will start using AI to attempt to source an answer for themselves because they just want it handed to them, and realize that they have no critical thinking skills, reading skills. They can't source, they can't validate anything. So anything that's treated as well, if you'll forgive the term, actually no, I'm using it deliberately, gospel. If we're going to treat it as gospel, okay, this also lends itself to fears of corruption, which you highlighted ever so briefly in the previous conversation. But aside from that, even if it's not malicious, it can be pernicious. It can be prevalent. It can be out there, and if we're dealing with a popularity-based engine, you really gotta wonder where it's gonna go wrong. But there's the people, like I said, I'm in regular conversations now, watching them fall to it in droves. I just asked AI, and the second I hear that, I'm hearing critical reading skills have left the building. They are gone. Okay. We are not sourcing. We're not validating. It's just pulling sources. Where's it coming from? I don't know, but AI told me what I wanted to hear.
It does hallucinate.
And it does that.
It does make shit up, y'all. It is worth knowing that. It does make stuff up. So, yeah.
Well, we are in the phase of, it could be that our purpose in life is to serve as a warning to others. And we may be on a form of precipice in that sense. And it's hard to say which way it's going to go. But this is like one of those sobering moments where we got to look back at all the other times we just followed orders in a way. Just march out. Now, what you mentioned about automation and farming and all that, yeah, that's not the same ballpark. We're not messing with minds.
Sure.
Okay. We're playing in mind space now. This is a different animal. We should treat it as such.
Hey, that's what I think the next big evolutionary step for humanity is. I think there's a lot of brain structure that's going on right now with people, and I think as we grow, we may not see in the next like 500,000 years, we may not see the great physiological shifts, right? Like we're probably not going to go down to 4 fingers. I feel fairly confident about that. Could be wrong. But I think a lot of the stuff that's going to be changing and the stuff that's going to matter is all right up here. This squishy lump of who knows what, man. So yeah, I think neuroscience is incredibly important. I love that stuff. So, but yeah, thanks for chatting with us.
Absolutely. I wanted to close up one quick point on one of the other topics you mentioned. Just a quick commentary before I cede the floor here.
Sure.
We brought the idea of like transference for consciousness and whatnot, and wondering what we would be, for instance. There was an interesting thought on that, which also followed some other ideas I had with regards to theological implications on what the afterlife would be, for instance. One quick sample on the theological side. Imagine a scenario where there's a mother and son. Imagine we were going into a standard Christian hell scenario, right? Okay, just for framework. Mother and a son both end up dying, but the son's going to go to the bad place. The mother is going to go to the good place. And you ask yourself, how can the mother be perfectly happy being a mother? Now, the mother has the nature of being the mother. How can she be perfectly happy knowing her son's down there? Well, someone might say, for instance, God might wipe away, the bad feelings, but it's like going, hey, if you're scrubbing that out, you're kind of erasing who she is as a person, really. Yeah. So who's occupying that entity that was me up there? Because that sure as heck ain't me, right? So by the same token, on the idea of, for instance, moving a consciousness from our biological body to some like automaton or AI, some other electronic format, take a look at just the idea of how our biology affects how we think, how our endocrine systems influence our brains. Like as much as you analyze our brain, it's like you gotta pump it through a body whose endorphins work in a way. Do you know
the microbiome in your gut?
I was going to the fact of how we are not individuals. I'm a collective. My gut, I got a population of millions, man, and
Most
they
of you is not
they
you.
affect me hormonally.
Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah. I am a collective that likes to think of itself as a single. So the moment we start removing those pieces, it's the same sort of thing as like when somebody sees you 10 years after they knew you in school, right? And you're like, wow, that's not the same person. No, it just doesn't follow the memory of who you are. It's like going, I'm not sure who that is with memories like that, but that ain't him.
Yeah.
That's who I think you would be.
Yeah. No, I get that. And there's a lot of great stuff. I want to say, I could be wrong on this. Forgive me. I want to say Derek Parfit has some really good stuff on like consciousness and the brain and like are you and all that good stuff. He's also, somebody that's a little bit newer. Not the 1500s or earlier philosophy stuff. So I think anything that's post enlightenment for most people is newer philosophy. But I mean, like Parfit, I think literally is in like the last like 10 or 15 years ish. So, but yeah, I really appreciate chatting with you, Andrew. Thank you so much. And I think we're probably gonna wrap up. And
yeah, let's wrap her up here.
Awesome.
Oh, sorry, cut you off.
I was saying the same
Andrew
thing.
off.
Yeah. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Andrew.
Whoops, I didn't know he was gonna speak again. He's probably just saying bye and thanks. But, yes, my apologies. But yeah, this was fun. This was good.
Yeah.
And
Thanks,
you
man.
got to discover my my inner fear there about dying and being put into a robot, and if that robot's really me, I think it's just an emulation of me. I think that's what it is.
Right, but again, does it matter if there's not another version? Like, who cares? You wouldn't know.
But I know, I just not exist and something else would exist.
But what would maybe like your consciousness right now just stops and then there's just a start of another consciousness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With all my memories. How creepy.
I spent like 3 hours once talking with like 4 different people about whether or not the Star Trek transporter thing, whether or not that actually kills you and then, brings up another version of, or whether or not it actually transfers. It's very, I think thing. that is a weird conversation for sure. And I don't know, I'll be honest. I don't know if we ever got like a super solid answer on that. It would change much about the world. I don't know that it would, because as far as I know, we currently don't have the ability. So until we get that ability, it's like,
we'll figure it out when we get there. Exactly.
Oh man.
All right. Let's get this plane on the ground. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Everybody who's watching on YouTube, everybody here's on Discord, especially the people who got up on stage. People are pretty cool. And SR, thanks for being my co-host here. This was
Thanks,
awesome. You're an awesome dude. And that's all I got to say. You got any final comments before we shut her down?
I appreciate it, man. I really, really appreciate being here, and I love having conversations with people, of course. And again, I think, one thing we said earlier was really, really important is in these types of interactions, in these types of spaces, what is our motivation? What is our goal? What is the end result that we are hoping is the case? And we should always be comfortable, again, to look in the mirror and say, am I accomplishing that goal? There are times that I sure have not done it. And I hope that I am able to, take that criticism and I'm able to kind of move forward and say, I can do better next time. I love the Maya Angelou quote, you do the best you can with the knowledge that you have, when you have more, you do better. Right. And so, yeah, we'll just keep going for that as best we can. And hopefully if I get off that track, somebody out there will call me out and maybe not be too terrible and a dick about it, but
I couldn't have said it better myself. All right. Good night, everybody.
If you've watched this far, you know what to do. Don't miss what's next. The choice is on you. Stay in the loop, keep your feet in line. Hit that bell, catch me live next time. It's simple, it's quick, but it means a lot. Stay connected, see the moves I've got. No promises, no fluff, just what's real. Subscribe and the updates seal the deal. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you. The stream's done now, but the content won't stop. So stay in the loop till I'm back at the top.